Hi, good morning. I'd like to call this meeting of the Ulster County Industrial Development Agency to order on September 30th at 9:31 a.m. I'd like to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge of allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Rose, roll call, please.
Faye Storm,
Here.
James Malcolm is absent with notice. Diane Einen.
Here.
Mike Camp,
here.
Orlando Reese.
Here.
Daniel Savona and Richard Jones are both absent with notice. We have a quorum.
Okay, I'd like you to take a moment to look at the minutes and somebody approve them.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Second.
All approved?
Aye.
Minutes approved. Okay, our next is page 6, and that's going to be the presentation of the proposed amended 2020-2023 and proposed 2024 budget. I'm going to turn that over to Rose because she's extremely familiar with it.
So I prepared the budget, but Rick and I went through every single line by line, and probably spent about 2 hours doing it. So we were really thorough. I was really disappointed that he's not feeling well today. I have 2 pages here. So page 6 shows the actuals for 2016 through 2019. And then we had, if you remember, we have to approve a 5-year budget to go to New York State. And then obviously we update it as we can. And this is the same thing we had to do last year because everything is entirely different for us than it had been in the prior years. On page 7, it's exactly what I'll be submitting as our budget. So it got rid of like the old one and then the new ones. It's just, here are all the new ones. The major changes would be, I'll start with 2020. I don't know if we'll have any other projects that'll close this year. I don't want to assume we will or won't. So I budgeted $150,000, which is what we already received from the Golden Hill acquisition, and that had to change. That was actually the number we had budgeted prior. When we did the budget, I didn't know you guys had voted before I came on board for annual administrative fees. So that got added in here to the budget. That was actually $37,000 plus. Then we've had, let's see, we have the application fees. So far, we only have 2, but I'm expecting 1 or 2 more to come in before the end of the year. So I just put in for 1 more for now, try to be conservative on revenue. Miscellaneous fees, those are things like people needed amendments to closing documents or people wanted extensions on sales tax. So I've added these new categories. Late fees, this is actually what we imposed as late fees for year to date. Paris is over, so that's a hard number for the year. And then the project administrative pass-through is when people pay us for us to then pass through to Loki Brill or to the CPA that did the check on the employment figures. Okay, investment earnings you can see are way down. I don't think that's much of a surprise. We've talked about it, I think, every single month at the board meetings. We did invest in another CD at the best rates I could find, but best rates are not good rates still. So unfortunately, we took a big hit on the investment earnings as well. Then we would have to pull in money from our savings, essentially. So right now it's $208,750. Obviously, if our expenses are less or our revenue is more, that number will be different. The reason it's so much is $200,000 of it is literally for the grants. And then $87.50, I'm actually, I was disappointed that that's how the numbers ended up, but I ran a report. The best I could figure year to date on time we've spent on grants where we've actually broken it out in our timesheets is a little over $8,000. So I'm not surprised that we were over budget on that. I also, two of you weren't here, but we had a public hearing back in March of this year. And when we had voted on the budget in November, we didn't know we were going to be having a public hearing. And when we did, I said about 50 times in the meeting, we're going to end up over budget on administrative costs because we had to do a mailing to 200 and something people, and it was just extremely labor intensive, and it added a few $1,000s extra of work as well. So that really, at the end of the day, it wasn't really a huge surprise to me. The contracts for services, I really struggled on this because it's obviously a huge difference. But right now we're at about $90,000. I could look at whatever the last report was on administrative fees. And my guess is that I don't see this happening for less than $12,000 a month at this point because we keep having meetings and we keep doing things and keep being productive. And we still have the grants that are continuing to take up an exorbitant amount of time. What I wanted to do, because I was like, I don't know, maybe I'm feeling like extra sensitive about it because it's for administrative staff, that's me. I then pulled up, if you go to page 8, what other IDAs are paying for their staff. And these are all ones that are like comparative to us. I didn't pull up Orange County, right? Their marketing budget is larger than our entire budget. So I didn't go with that. But I looked at all these other ones that are similar, comparable, or even smaller than what we are. And you can see I either took the information from See Through New York for 2019, or I took it from their budgets on their websites, and you can see what everybody else is paying their staff. What I also found interesting about that is like Dutchess County, they're paying a CEO and a CFO. Those people, they only have 2 people on staff. They're obviously paid well. It's a big job, I'm more than aware. But Dutchess County also budgets about a few $100,000 loss every year, and they're pulling from savings to pay for the staff as well. So even though it's a big change in our budget, it's still less than what other IDAs are doing, and it's also less, I don't know. And we're also not drawing from savings to pay staff. And because we have this unique situation where you don't have somebody on salary. So I'm not stuck at X amount of money if we have no projects. If we have no work, we have no projects, we get paid less. So if revenue is down or meetings are down, then we don't charge as much as what it would be. So I wanted to explain that. A couple of other things I noticed is other IDAs have a CFO for hire, meaning they pay like an accounting firm to do their CFO job, and they pay $10,000 to $15,000 a year for that. We don't have to do that. We had gone for a budget for Rick's position. We were hoping to try to find someone for $6,000. For over a year, we were unsuccessful to find someone that wants to work for that much money for the CFO position. So my office also does all of that. We don't need a CFO for hire to come in and do adjusting journal entries or to come in and fix the books because we're just doing basic inputting. We're an accounting firm, so like our books are spot on. They didn't make any adjustments when they did the audit last year.
So Rose, I just thought a couple thoughts about that. I mean, the administrative fees are up, so as you said, is the activity of the board.
Yes.
And the projects are more complex, et cetera.
Yes.
And so, I think we all agree do a great job, and the staffing is just wonderful. So, I mean, if we're getting increased administrative fees, it's because we're increasing our work effort, which is all good, in my opinion. So, I would say if we weren't that busy and the fees were going up and we weren't happy with the quality of work, that would be an issue, but that's not the case at all.
And you remember the other thing I did, I go through everybody's invoices, right? I go through the attorney's invoices line by line. I go through everybody's invoices. Nobody is necessarily going through my invoices line by line, but last month I talked to Diane, and now every quarter at the audit committee meetings, I asked her if the audit committee would review my invoices line by line. When we, it's not perfect for an IDA system, but I try to put notes on everything we're doing and try to use our codes at work in our billing software as best as I can. So there'll be oversight also on the administrative work so that somebody else is watching. I think it's good practice to do that.
Good.
So then the next thing here, legal fees. In prior years it kind of looked strange, but that's because we had the lawsuit. And we also had no administrative staff for the first 6 months of 2019, which is why those 2 years were huge. If you look back at 16 and 17, that's more along the lines of what our legal fees had been in the past. And so I had budgeted 20,000 for this year because I went, well, I would go with double what we were thinking. The original budget was 10,000. I'll go with double because I know we have a lot of work to do. And unfortunately, we're over budget already for the year. So I had to go to 40,000 for this year. Auditing fees, I brought it down to what it actually was because I'm trying to save every dollar in this budget. Live stream, I estimated $9,500. It's $500. It's not just per meeting because like Aaron doesn't charge us extra if he's here and we go into the CRC. He's not charging us an extra $500. But we didn't have the live stream budget in here. We didn't do anything like that before, and we didn't know what it was going to cost. So I had to put it in. Website and marketing. For this year, I brought it down from the 15,000 to 2,000, which is more in line with what we've spent, because we're not going to have time to do much, I think, in the way of marketing for the rest of the year, unfortunately. But if you look, I kept it, pushed it right back up to 15 for the years to come, because I do think it's important to do some of the stuff we talked about. I just don't see it happening this year with everything we have on our plate, and also budget-wise. Office expense and postage, a lot of that's postage, a lot of certified return receipt stuff went out this year. Project pass-through, again, that would be Loki Brill, et cetera, that's just a wash. Cost benefit analysis software, we added that in, I think it's important, we're supposed to be doing it. The insurance went up a little bit because we added that technology policy that I feel is really important. The meeting room rental came down because we no longer have to pay to rent. And miscellaneous, seminars and conferences, that would be like when Diane and Joe Ariel and I attended the EDC, and I had a workshop online, and I attended the EDC in January. Miscellaneous, we purchased the plaque for Randall. It was $90, so I put in $100 here. Grants is the $200,000 we discussed, and I lowered the travel and meals because I'm not traveling to the workshops and conferences because everything was Zoom this year. Up top, I just wanted to come back up, sorry, into the contracts for services. That's $24.80. In there is our Zoom fee and our public hearing stenographer when we did the UTEP change and that kind of stuff. So that's everything that's in here. Then going forward for 2021, I did raise the revenue. It wasn't just to balance the budget. What I did was I actually took a 5-year average of the revenue, and it came out to, give or take, $215,000. So that's how I bumped it up. That it's not a made up number in there. Administrative fees, we have a few projects dropping off. I didn't want to plan on more projects adding on, so I just brought it down to $35,000. It seemed like a good even number. And then everything I think is pretty explanatory. The investment earnings, if rates stay the same as where they are and have been, then they'll be cut in half even again next year. It's terrible. It's so terrible.
Is there, should I ask you at the end of this?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Oh, my question is there some exploratory that we can talk about possibly where we can start to make some money from our money? Besides interest, we know is a no-go for any kind of money.
Yeah,
I mean, is it?
It's hard with like public entities, most try to be extremely safe, so like, I would say the craziest thing we could do would probably be bonds of
I
some
was gonna
kind.
say bonds.
But other than that, we're kind of stuck on doing too much. It is still better than what we were doing in the past, if that's any consolation. So the contracts for services, it comes down to $12,000 a month, and plus $9,000 for the year end of doing the site visits, minus $9,000 that gets pushed over to the CRC. So that's how I came up with 144. The contracts for services,
That's what you just said.
the next one, I'm sorry, that was administrative. The contracts for services is anything else that we're paying for services that we end up needing, and that's sort of extra money that was in our budget, so that's where I put it. Legal fees, I tried to find a happy medium between 20 and 40,000. I know we still have a lot of work to do. I'd really like to see that number be lower than 30, but I don't want to constantly be coming back and raising the budget for expenses. I do also want to tell you all, I sent out an RFP yesterday for attorneys, and I also sent out an RFP yesterday for administrative staff. So we'll see how those things pan out, and then maybe those things could affect the budget as well. So again, if you could spend less than what you budgeted, that would be ideal. Everything else I think makes sense. I raised live stream to 12,000 going forward because we didn't have as many meetings in 2020, because technically like audit is supposed to meet every quarter. Governance I expect to meet more, but we were kind of slow at the beginning of this year with the changes that we had going on. And I think that's it for me on
Well,
this.
it's a good job,
I'm happy to answer, but
Good report.
I spent a really long
really
time on it.
good report, really detailed.
Yeah, I just want, when you raise expenses, I think it's important. Oh, I did reach out to the ABO as Jimmy requested. I forwarded the response to Rick, and he agreed with me. No, they don't want to see a contingency line, because their response was, it's your job to safeguard the money and to
Put
make
it in
sure
now,
it's being
yeah.
spent exactly how you intend for it to be spent. And just saying however this gets spent isn't good enough. So no, I didn't put a contingency on it, but there's that contract for services that could be almost anything, right? And there's miscellaneous of $500 if there's something random that needs to be purchased. And 500 I feel like is fair to be miscellaneous. That's a really de minimis amount. So this, then the page 7 is like a summarized version without having to see all the detail. And 8, like I said, is just what everybody else is paying. I also talked to the Office of State Comptroller this week. They had more questions on our Paris report for 19. Doesn't mean that everything is wrong in it. It just means what he exactly told me was they've added more staff at the Office of State Comptroller to specifically go through IDA Paris reports. And every year they're going to scrutinize our reports. And so I explained to him the changes we were making. I explained why we have things that weren't closed out properly. I had to explain why projects have zeros. Well, they didn't tell us. And I explained all the things we're doing to do a better job, and he was really pleased with what we're doing. But it's just, he said the same thing. It's very different. Projects aren't used to having to do as much as we're requesting. And it is what it is. We don't have a choice. Staffing's gonna cost more because the state comptroller is requiring more.
Well, you're doing a great job, Rose.
I mean, it looks like this year's budget, making you live, it makes sense. I mean, when you throw the grants in and just increase administrative and legal fees, we're about 64,200 over what we had originally. And it's all understandable. And I think those, you're reflecting that in proposed amendment for the future years, it will be active and busy, so.
Yeah, I mean, we've also had an extra cost. Every single meeting that's on Zoom or partially on Zoom has to be transcribed. So even though we're using a third-party software that's super cheap, it also, for example, it doesn't understand people's names, like IDA, it thinks is idea, or people, like Mike Ham could be something else, so like, we have to go through and correct. Yeah, we have to go through and correct every line, so there's added expenses for all those kinds of things. And hopefully, some of that stuff will ease up,
I'm sure some of this is gonna change,
I'm sure it will.
I'm sure of it. So,
Okay, thank you. Do we don't need to vote on anything, we're all set with that
You have to
information?
approve the budget to recommend it to the full board. And then the board will have to vote on it on October 21st, so that I can turn it over to ABO before the end of the month. Motion to.
I'll motion that we approve the budget for 2021.
A second?
Second?
What, are you gonna approve them all? No, just 21.
All of them have to be.
Really?
Yes.
Well, they're pretty much all in sync
Yeah.
right now, so
So it's
Okay,
revised
so-
2020 through 2021.
I motion to approve the budgets for 21, 22, 23, and 24.
And revised 2020.
And revised 2020, correct.
Thank you,
Second.
sorry.
Nope,
All in
it's
favor?
on there.
Aye.
Aye.
Approved.
Thank you.
Okay,
And, oh, sorry.
anything else anybody has to say or anything? Okay, I'd like to adjourn this meeting. I'd like to have someone making a motion to adjourn.
Aye. I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're closed, we're adjourned.